Here we are.
Welcome back. We're back. It's been a long wait. Greg, I was looking and I noticed that the last time we did one of these What's This Bird live programs was back in June. So there's no truth to the rumor that we got scared off by far too many bald cardinal photos.
We did not. And I have to my audio, just as soon as I clicked in, my audio went out. So I can hear you very softly.
You've got something. Sorry, that was on my end. So can you hear me, Greg?
I can hear you, but you're very soft. But we'll try to work through that while.
That's my fault. Let me turn my my mic.
There you go.
My problem. It's probably on my end. You know, we're a little out of practice, folks. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. After our 2 months off, you've got to expect a little bit of rustiness.
We thought we had it nailed, though.
We thought we had it. My name is Nate Swick. I'm the digital communications manager at the American Birding Association. I'm joined, as per usual, by my colleague Greg Neise, the webmaster of the American Birding Association. But in addition to doing all these little things for the ABA, we're also birders. And we are the people in charge, your friendly admins, two of your friendly admins in the What's This Bird, the ABA's What's This Bird Facebook page, which, if you are unfamiliar with that page, is effectively a crowdsource community for helping to identify birds and have birding questions. It's fall. A lot of birds out there. A lot of birds coming back south. They are confusing, as is their wont. Shorebirds, young warblers. We're going to tackle all of those today. As I vamp to get some more folks in here now. Greg, how was your summer? What have you been doing in our time? Time off?
Just lollygagging in the backyard, eating grapes and drinking champagne.
Typical stuff.
Boy, what a weird year we're all going through on every front. It was I suppose as good a summer as could be expected given the circumstances. Had a lot of interesting birds around this summer, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's been quite the summer for vagrant spoonbills. This #spoonbill summer.
Absolutely.
Limpkins, swallow-tailed kites, lots of southern birds finding their way into northern places, which is which is what you would expect in such a hot summer that we've seen all across the continent for the most part.
I think it was 2013, 2014, around there. I was writing a series of essays about the Southern Illinois birding gods, and Limnathlippus, which is the premier of the Southern Illinois birding gods. That's the genus name of Swainson's warbler. In one of my essays, I wanted to come up with something that was just absolutely preposterous. And so in one of these essays, Limnathlippus, the birding god of Southern Illinois, is sitting in a cypress tree and throws a cypress cone at the first state record of limpkin, flushing it away from birders who are almost about to see it. So that was like one of the most insane vagrants I could think to come up with. And now we've had two limpkins in Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is one of the last a state that surprisingly did not have any limpkin records until this summer, and I think they've had something like a half dozen at least.
Did you say Texas?
Texas, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't there I think there might have actually been attempted breeding. That's
might have been. It's one of those
something lost in the haze, but
yeah. Those species that rely on sort of ephemeral wetlands and things of that nature. When they move and they find a place that they like, they will occasionally attempt to breed if there's more than one around.
Yeah, but I mean, limpkin is such a specific. It has such a specific food source. I mean, it's a snail specialist,
right?
And it feeds on these tropical and semi-tropical big snails, apple snails. And I guess, the ones that we've had up here have figured out that clams are just as freshwater clams are
Yep.
just as good.
Mussels. Yeah, they eat
But
mussels when they come up here. Yep.
but also there are escaped mystery snails, which are big, those big black aquarium snails that are, feral in the waterways here. And the limpkin, one of the limpkins we had here, one of three in the last couple of years, has been feeding on those.
Was that right? Huh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so it's been quite a summer for a lot of vagrant birds. We can certainly talk about that. If you have any questions about birds or birding, as usual, please leave them in the comments. We'll happily take them on as we go. But what we have planned for this program is to tackle a few of the photos that have popped up in the What's This Bird Facebook group in the last few days. We tend to get a sense of what people are curious about, what people are seeing, what people are having issues with. Based on that group, it's amazing how predictable it is from year to year and what's going on right now. We are just kind of moving past shorebirds, though there are a few shorebirds showing up, but we're definitely into migrating warbler season. It's the second week of September. We're ramping up in the peak in some parts in the northern southern Canada, northern part of the U.S. Down here where I am, we're just now starting to get migrating warblers. A lot of people are going out to see them. And people are having a lot of questions about them, and we're going to tackle a few of those today. But first, Greg has some other stuff. It's been a while.
Well, yeah.
we have some housekeeping to take care of, and some ABA stuff that we do want to talk about.
I would say a little bit of trumpeting. We've been busy. We've been busy over the summer, and one of the things that we are really excited about, and me in particular, is a revamped ABA website. And you can see up here above my head, let's see, where is it? Right there. ABA.org is our website. And you'll find it, we've completely redesigned it. There's lots of great free content. You'll see right there in the center the ABA podcast, which Nate produces every other week. We have rare...
Yesterday.
We have... Yesterday, that's right. Rare Bird Alert, and we have our flagship magazine, Birding, and of course North American Birds, and a lot of other stuff available there, almost all for free. So if you, when you're done here, go on over there and check it out. But I want to show you a couple of things that I think you might enjoy, and one of them is ABA Birding News. And if you haven't seen Birding News before, this is old school tech, but it's neat. It's
the listserv.
A listserv aggregator. So listservs is how birders kept in touch before Facebook. And it's basically simple email, simple back and forth with email sent email groups. And here you can navigate through all of the listservs across the ABA area and around the world, and not just birding, but also dragonflies and butterflies, rare bird alerts, and things like that.
I'll tell you my favorite thing about the new Birding News, Greg, because I produce the Rare Bird Alert every Friday that goes on the ABA website. It's essentially just a kind of a snapshot of all the unusual birds that are being seen in all the states and provinces of the ABA area. And I tell you how I used to do it was in the old Birding News. I would go through and look at every single listserv in the country for the last week and try and find, if someone put an unusual bird in the subject line of an email, I would find it, and that's how I would do my research for that every week. And it would take a long time. It would take a while to go through them all and sort them all through, and my eyes would be very tired by the end of it. But what Greg has done is provide an opportunity to do that much quicker. It's an integration with eBird. eBird, you put in an eBird checklist. If you see something unusual, it gets flagged as a notable, and you have to provide information with that. But eBird is all public. All of its code is public, and so what we can do is integrate it with our Birding News. And so what you can do is you can see that little notables notation right underneath the date. You can click that, and it will tell you whatever unusual birds have been reported on any of the listservs. It finds them and sorts them and collates them. It's really, really cool.
So actually, just a slight correction there. Actually,
Yeah.
what we have is it's not actually integrated with eBird. That's Listing Central.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing here is some PHP magic built by Matt Smith of Fantasy
Cornell,
Birding.
yeah.
And it's a database of all of the ABA species with all of the state lists coded out 1 through 6 on order of rarity.
Yeah.
Sort of similar to the ABA codes, but different. And then the script goes through and looks for those bird names, and when it finds matches, it pops them up as notables.
Yeah. And
so
sometimes it catches it when people are just having discussions about potential sightings or
Exactly.
all that stuff, which is fine, and you can sort that out. But honestly, having all that stuff in front of you is really, really cool.
It is,
and
it's just really fun. It's really fun to see what's going on in other places.
Yes.
And by going down the list there, you can see what people are seeing, what they're talking about, and so that the next thing here is along that same line, and that is North American Birds Field Reports. So if you go to our website under magazines up there at the top, magazines and books, and then go to North American Birds, you will see the regional reports. And these regional reports are written by birders in those areas. We have volunteer editors and field editors. And each one of these is a narrative of that season. What was the trend? What were the good birds seen? Were there more warblers this year than usual? Were there more?
It's like the 30,000 foot view of the bird situation in those regions.
Yes, and richly illustrated. And since I've been working on this, I have just learned so much more about the bird life of the ABA area and Central America and the Caribbean as well, which is covered in the North American Birds regional reports. But it's a really neat way to find out what's going on in other places and learn about status and distribution across the ABA area and a little beyond.
Yep. So really cool stuff. Please check out our website, aba.org. Join the ABA and help us support these sort of initiatives that help promote the birding community and provide resources for the birding community, aba.org/join. We have been gone for 2 months, so you're not going to be able to get away from the promotion of the ABA in this spot. But hopefully we've given you some cool stuff. And Greg, let's go to the birds.
Let's get into it. All right. So our first one here is from Rockville, Maryland, and this one, I can't remember. I can't pull up the screen right now to see what the first guess was, but it was not correct. But what do we got? Look, one of the things with warblers at this time of the year is the lighting. You have leaves that are turning yellow and green and orange, and typically in the fall you have these bright blue sky days and the sun's a little low, and the lighting is just horrendous.
It can be difficult, and it can throw you off, and especially when you're taking photos, and some cameras aren't very good at sort of fixing that. They give you these weird photo artifacts, whereas in this bird, you can kind of have a look at it and you can see it looks a lot more kind of limey, greeny yellow than you might have seen it in the field. Yeah.
Now, what we can see on this bird is that it has 2 bright white wing bars, and it has kind of a strong pale supercilium. That's the eyebrow stripe. But other than that, it looks kind of plain. It's got kind of a dark area in the face, but that's really kind of subdued.
So when we think about fall warblers, I think Peterson did us a real disservice by putting them in his original in his original field guide as confusing fall warblers. And yes, there are a few species pairs that are actually legitimately confusing, and it's nice to get a good look at them. But one of the things about fall warblers that you sort of come to understand as you see more of them is that most of the time they look like pretty washed out versions of the spring warblers. So a lot of these patterns that we see in spring birds that we sort of see as, you know, the classic warbler patterns, the stuff that when they're easy to identify, is there. You just have to look a little bit harder for it. And so on this bird, what I'm sort of seeing is, and I'm now sort of second guessing myself as I've kind of
this is a great one to start, because I've been second guessing myself. I mean, it's one of two species.
What stands out to me is that dark cheek is what I'm saying. Like the face pattern, the pale eyebrow and the dark cheek. And I'm just going to throw this out there. This looks, from what I can see, like a Blackburnian warbler. Now you're going to tell me it's not, right?
Well, now, no, I'm not going to tell you it's not, because to be honest, I don't know. But what I'm seeing what you see. The other thing I see is right at the back of the ear, the auricular, like the back of the cheek where it joins the neck. There's sort of that little push up of color. Yeah. Like a little pale. That's
the side of the neck. Yeah.
Yeah. That's typical of Blackburnian warbler. The face pattern is typical of Blackburnian warbler. The things that are a little bit confusing on this bird, the back looks really plain. Now it's got a white highlight up there, and it's hard to see what's going on the back.
Yeah.
But the back looks
I'm inclined to think that plain. This is more of a like what, not necessarily what you can see, but what you can't see. So it's like a negative field mark. Like it does look plain, but I am not certain that it actually is plain because of the way the kind of light is playing off of it. I don't think we can make a lot of assumptions on that back based on what we can see here.
That's absolutely right. The other two things I see, and these are just hunches. These are just from having seen these birds hundreds of times over the years. A couple of other things I see is that little bit of a cocked tail and the bill shape. The bill shape is kind of long, and it's kind of long. All right. So it's either a Blackburnian or a cerulean. If we had other pictures proving it to be one or the other, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think the face pattern has me leaning more Blackburnian,
right?
But I've seen ceruleans that look like this.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
If it's a cerulean, it would be a first-year female.
Yeah, Steve Huggins in the Facebook comments notes the same thing.
Right, I'm just ahead of you there, Steve. Just hold on to your pants.
Yeah, it's that's a good point.
But the cocktail and the bill shape, when I saw this bird, my first impression was cerulean warbler. The bright white wing bars, the overall shape and posture and the bill shape. But then I looked at it more, and like you were saying, start to second guess yourself. So
yeah.
It's one or the other.
I'm always thinking horses rather than zebras. Cerulean always strikes me as the more uncommon, certainly an uncommon fall bird, whereas Blackburnian is a pretty common, fall migrant in a lot of the east. But as you say, I don't know that I could.
Cerulean is not rare by any means. Not rare.
I think of it as rare. But that's mostly because they see them over towards the coast and on the in the mountains. It's where I am in the Piedmont of North Carolina. I
don't know where Rockville is.
I went last fall though. Rockville is in Western Maryland, I believe, but I could Google that to be sure.
Anyway, so this is either a cerulean or a Blackburnian. Well, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier about the spot behind the mask. I mentioned that. But again,
you can never be exactly sure what you're seeing.
Is that artifacting
in a single photo? I'd like to see another photo. Yeah,
exactly. So, I think that the needle tilts to Blackburnian. But like I said, if other pictures of this bird came up and it showed it to be a cerulean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So this is a tip for all you would-be warbler photographers out there. When you see something like that, set your camera up to take those, what's the term to take a bunch of pictures all at once?
Rapid fire, high
Rapid
speed.
fire, and smash that shutter button and get like 25 photos of this thing, and then you can actually start to pick them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Greg, do you have a bird that we can identify in this list, or is it going to be like this?
I'm not so sure. We're going to keep going here. There we go.
I can identify this one.
All right. Well, then take it away.
Well, this is another issue where we're talking about the leaves kind of turning yellow, kind of getting paler as the fall goes on, and giving off this really, really green sheen. And, if the white balance is not properly set on your camera, or if it's set to, auto, you're going to kind of get some of these weird kind of greeny, limey green photos of warblers this time of year. It's a real common thing. But there are a few things about this bird that really stand out to me. One is the broken eye ring. You can see that pretty well. It's pretty thick. That's kind of nice. I do think that yellow on the chin is accurate. I don't think that's a photo artifact, because we're looking further back down the body of that bird. You can see that it does sort of get paler. And while the breast and the belly do look a little bit yellowy green, they're not nearly as yellow as the chin. So we know that that is actual yellow. It's got a wing bar there, but it's a pretty thin one. And just the overall shape of this bird is really compact. It's kind of large-headed, short-tailed. That's a big thing. And that's what's going to lean me in the direction of one particular, actually quite common fall warbler species that people are going to be seeing a lot. And I'll leave kind of the slam dunk field mark there on the front of the bird to you, Greg. But for the most part,
just go for it. Just go for it.
Okay, well, look at that bill. This bird has a bicolored bill. The mandible is pale. That only means one commonly occurring bird in North America, in the ABA area, I should say, and that is northern Perula, Parula, however you want to pronounce it. But this is Perula americana, northern Perula. A lot of these around right now. Hard to miss in any warbler flock anywhere in the eastern part of the continent.
Yeah, and you were talking about Peterson a little while ago, and Peterson, I think the way that Peterson had the birds laid out was a really good start. But when you get really familiar with warblers, and especially when you're able to study your own photographs, you will notice that there are subtle but very, very obvious, differences in bill shapes. Like you notice that last bird we saw has a very differently shaped bill than this bird. Pretty
long. Yep.
But yes,
Perula,
northern Perula.
Perula has a very small bill, just a very compact warbler just in general. It's sort of unique among warblers. Sometimes cerulean can seem compact, but cerulean has very long wings. So the wings kind of stretch down the tail even though it is compact, and Perula has like little short wings. The whole bird is just kind of small and cute. And of course the yellow mandible, you're thinking about how you're seeing these birds a lot of times. They're directly above you. And if you see a bird, Perula, or a warbler with a pale mandible, it's only one thing it can be.
And a couple of pitfalls too is, the yellow, like Nate was saying, are we sure the yellow is that a color cast? Is that artifacting? I think I agree with you that, obviously it is correct. But also birds' faces can get covered with pollen.
Yeah, that happens a lot this time of year.
Warblers like Perula,
my sinuses tell you that there's a lot of pollen out there.
They dive their faces into the flowers and they get covered with pollen. And one thing that's fairly common is you'll see Tennessee warblers with yellow on their faces.
Yeah, that's a very common. Yeah, it's a very common thing, even in the West as well. A lot of there's some flowers coming out. Typically things like orange-crowned warbler and Nashville warbler we'll see even with like that sticky nectar all over their feathers that kind of mats down their the feathers around their bill. But those sorts of things, those sort of field marks, it shows you that you don't want to just like focus on one field mark. You're looking at this sort of holistic bird. You're looking at all the things that the bird is showing to you. And if one of those field marks doesn't quite match what you expect, but everything else matches what you would expect, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking at a different species. It looks like you're looking at an abnormal individual, or an individual that, as Greg says, has some pollen all over its face and is giving you a slightly different look.
All right.
McPherson says, take a long burst. That's the word I was looking for.
Take a long burst. Yes, burst. Thank you, Mia.
Yep. Smash.
So from Northwest Indiana, let's go to Colorado.
Ooh, let's do some Western birds. All right, we do. I do want to say, Vyam Vyas, who has a question about Impidinax flycatchers. I do see that, and it is not just because it is about Impidinax that I am avoiding that. We are avoiding that question. We will get to it. Let's talk about Impidinax flycatchers. I don't know if you have any photos or anything you can snag and like comparison shots or anything. I know you usually have a lot of those. We'll do this warbler, and then maybe we can talk a little about flycatchers, because there are some flycatchers moving through, and then some confusion species around as well that's worth noting.
Yeah. Well, just to finish that. Well, just to finish, I don't can't really pop up any comparison images into this.
We'll just talk
into this what we're doing here. But yeah, we can certainly talk about that. So this is from Breckenridge, Colorado. It's a small, kind of brownish, grayish, streaky thing.
Yeah, it is streaky.
And
not much on this bird.
You know, if you went flipping through your field guide and couldn't find anything that looked like this, I wouldn't.
You might not find it.
Yeah, because this is a juvenile warbler, and now we know it's a warbler for two reasons. One, it has that very thin warbler bill, but there are other birds that have those kind of thin warbler bills. And there are other brown streaky birds in the mountains of Colorado, like pine siskin.
Quite a few, actually, yeah.
But look at the tail on the picture on the left, that big white spot. And one thing that juvenile warblers, even when they're ratty like this, so now this is true juvenile plumage. So this is the first plumage the bird has when it comes out of the nest. And most warblers molt out of this very quickly and go into what we call fall plumage or first year plumage.
First basic.
But exactly, first basic. But that juvenile plumage that they have for a very short amount of time, almost exclusively on the breeding grounds. They tend to be done with this plumage after they have left the breeding grounds. But
and it's typically a sort of very fragile body plumage as well. Like the feathers are not as strong as you would expect for the feathers that they're going to hold for longer, and so you end up with birds like this one that look very, very ratty. It's just meant to be a very temporary feather, like the flight feathers that they have, and that's why Greg is pointing out, why the tail is so important. The flight feathers are going to hold them for actually, I think an entire year. So it won't be until fall next year that this bird will replace its wing and tail feathers, but its body plumage is going to go through at least 1 to 2 more molts before that happens again.
Yep. And the tail feather tells us that it is a warbler because of that big white spot.
Yeah.
And from there, now we can look at the warblers that are in Colorado at this time, and that really narrows it down quite a bit. Some of the birds that have a white spot like this, or white like a white band across the end of the tail, you really don't find too many of them in Colorado. Off the top of my head, can you think of any?
My Colorado birding experience is pretty limited, so I wouldn't know what's option, but I can't imagine there are that many. When you think about similar sized birds that you might confuse a warbler for, you mentioned siskins, finches, sparrows, the bush tits, things like that. I don't know that any of those birds have significant white in their tail, so that is a really good way to kind of narrow it down a little bit.
And the white pattern, if you have Sibley or the Warbler Guide where they show the white, where they show the tail feathers of warblers very well, this is a juvenile yellow rumped warbler the Audubon's subspecies.
Audubon's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes to show that these juvenile plumages can be really, really confusing because they don't really look like anything. I mean, adult Audubon's warbler, the fall Audubon's warbler, is sort of an overall brown bird with a little bit of yellow on the chin. But even that, you're not even seeing that all that much. And the breast and the belly is sort of that yellow wash with brown streaks. I mean, that's not something that you would necessarily see in the adult birds, and it's not something that this bird is going to show for much longer. It's very obviously in the middle of body molt. It's going to change pretty significantly in the next couple weeks before it starts moving on. And this is a tough bird, especially this late in the year when you don't necessarily think of juvenile birds showing up that much. Yeah, usually we're past that. That's a
I think a lot of people are very familiar with yellow rumped warbler. It's one of the most common migrants across most of the ABA area. And if you just look at the overall shape and structure and impression the bird gives on the right, it's just that's total yellow rump right there.
It's a sturdy warbler. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, look at the bill shape and how the bill shape is subtly but very noticeably different from the last two warblers we saw.
Yeah, you getting your warbler fix, folks? A lot of warblers going on right now.
We're not done yet. Okay, this.
Before we move on, I did promise that we would talk a little bit about Empidonax flycatcher.
Oh yes, that's right.
If you wanna, yeah. So VLMAS, can you kindly provide some features to differentiate on Empidonax species other than vocalizations? And that is notoriously one of the more difficult identification conundrums in the ABA area are Empidonax flycatchers. And I'll come out and say right off the top that my personal experience is mostly with the Eastern Empidonax warblers. I don't know exactly where you are located, Vion, but there are some issues with Western Empidonax flycatchers that are slightly different. But I can talk a little bit about the ones that we are likely to see here. And there are obviously some tough ones. The Trails complex, the alder and willow flycatchers, and without any sort of vocalizations, I would be extremely hesitant to identify those birds, though certainly given good enough photos. Greg, I don't know if this is true for you. You can sort of get an impression of which one it is, but it's not anything that I would really, stake anything positive, any like certainty on. Trails flycatchers.
Early on in the podcast, Ted Floyd and I did an ID little discussion. And one of the very first ones was white-cheeked geese, cackling goose, Canada goose. And one of the things that Ted brought up is that when you're looking at, let's say, a flock of 5,000 geese out on a field or on a slough, and there's cackling geese and there's Canada geese. And there's this spectrum of subspecies that go from giant Canada geese down to very tiny cackling geese.
Yeah.
And at the opposite ends of the spectrum, it's obvious. This is a Canada goose. This is a cackling goose. And there's no question. But then as you get towards the middle, it gets harder and harder and harder. And there's probably like somewhere between 10 and 25% of those birds that you're just not going to be able to assign to a species because they're just right in the middle. And Empidonax flycatchers are like that when trying to identify them by sight. There are going to be birds where you look at that bird and you're like, that is an alder. I don't need to, or that is a, Acadian. An Acadian is one that's, it's got really long wings. It has longer wings. It's like almost approaching peewee in shape. The tail is shorter, but yellow-bellied is another one. But the lighting this time of year can throw people really off with yellow-bellied.
And first-year Acadian flycatchers do tend to show yellow bellies, and people tend to get confused on that species, though yellow-bellied and Acadian are shaped rather differently. So if for my money, the real confusion species with yellow-bellied frequently is least flycatcher, just because they are sort of equally large-headed and sort of appear large-eyed and short-winged. That's sort of the big thing. Yeah, whereas Acadians have very long wings.
And the western flycatchers, same basic thing. I mean, there are, you will find plenty that you can just look at and say that's what that is, based on bill structure, wing structure, habitat, especially some of the really, like Grake flycatcher. But then there's gonna be those 10 to 20% in the middle that if it's not calling,
Dusky and Hammonds is the confusion species
exactly
out west. So I don't really know what to tell you, Viad. I think you go into Impidinax flycatchers kind of knowing that not everything can be identified and sort of accepting that straight out. And you can get sort of feelings about some birds, and some species are definitely a little bit easier than others. I'm thinking, like as we said, Acadian and least tend to be the ones that give me the least amount of trouble. I think I can identify most of those. But anytime you get like a trails, it can be difficult. You said 10 to 15% with Canada geese. I'd probably say about at least half of the trails, if not a little bit more, can be really, really difficult this time of year. So there are some that seem especially willowy and especially aldery, but those are probably more the exception than the rule.
Absolutely.
Birding humbles you. You just gotta kind of gotta accept going in that you're not going to be able to identify everything.
Birding is hard.
Do the best you can. Birding is easy, but birding is hard.
Yes. All right, Chicago, Illinois. Look at this. I love this picture.
That's great.
So what we have here is we can't really tell how big or small it is. We sort of can by the branches.
I'm going to say the smaller side.
This looks like pretty small branches there that it's in. So we'll say this is a smaller bird. We can't tell if it's coming towards us or flying away. It kind of looks like it might be coming towards us a little bit. I think I see the wings in front of the tail.
I assume that I'm underneath it, and it's kind of above me. That's how I'm imagining this bird is oriented.
But look at that tail.
Yeah.
And there is only one species, really, that has that tail pattern. And that is Magnolia Warbler.
Yep.
And again, we're going back to the yellow rumped warbler we had before. It's with the warblers, pay attention to the tail pattern.
Yeah,
because that's
tail never changes. It's the same in summer. It's the same in winter. It's the same year round. The tail is never going to change, even if the body plumage does. And so kind of, if you get a good look at the tail, and I'm going to say this is an exceptional look at the tail of this Magnolia Warbler.
So
it's got such a distinctive pattern, the white tail with the black, I've heard it described as dipped in ink. It's a very clean line,
very
deep,
heavy terminal band.
Tail. Exactly. That's a Magnolia Warbler thing. That's a Maggie thing. So that's what you're always going to see with that species.
So, here we now have a couple of little yellowish fall warblers.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the one on the right, and what do you see?
I see the tail.
You see that same tail pattern.
Yeah.
And so these are both Magnolia Warblers.
Yeah.
The one on the right shows the slam dunk field mark, which is that heavy black terminal band on a white tail. Other things we can see here are the yellow underparts, the eye ring, but boy, Nashville has that too. But Nashville doesn't have the wing bars. Nashville also this bird has a little the bird on the left. Both of them do have a little gray collar, which is another thing that's kind of subtle about Magnolia Warbler in this plumage.
Yeah, when I talked about warblers, when I talked about warblers being sort of washed out versions of their spring selves, Magnolia Warbler changes more than a lot of warblers, but it is still a bit of a washed out version of its spring self.
Yes.
The bird on the right is a male bird, an adult male in fall plumage. You can imagine, Magnolia Warbler in the spring has that really big mask. It has those that necklace of streaks on the sides and across the breast. Now imagine that bird without the mask and without the necklace, and that's the fall magnolia. Those are the parts that are gone for the most part. And everything else is the same. Magnolia Warbler is a behaviorally rather distinctive warbler. They tend to flick their tail back and forth. They have a very long tail. They tend to flick it a lot while they're foraging, and so that's something that you're going to see in the spring, in the fall, as well as in the spring.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean the wings and tail look the same as they would in the spring, which makes sense. That part of the the bird. These are birds that replace their flight feathers once a year, but replace their body feathers twice a year. So those are the same flight feathers they had in their spring plumage. So that stuff is always going to stay the same.
Yeah. So when you're watching these birds, as Nate mentioned, the Magnolia Warbler and Redstart, birds that have these flashy tail patterns, hooded warbler, they want you to see them. They flip them and they flash them and they flip them. And so if you're watching the bird, even for just a few seconds, chances are very high that you're going to see that slam dunk field mark that just kind of overshadows everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, Magnolia Warblers.
Behavior and habitat are really useful, as well, even year round. I always think of Magnolia Warbler as being kind of a brushy, shrubby sort of warbler. Well, obviously they can be up in the canopy, but even in the spring, I tend to see them in like willow groves and kind of not terribly high, and that's what they love in the fall: sumac, willow, kind of low growing, scrubby plants. That's where you'd see them. That's where it looks like those birds are.
And you can tell from the angle of these birds that they're kind of down low. So I think if I remember my sequence here, that we're gonna change gears a little bit.
Ooh.
And there we go.
Ooh,
Another very confusing group of birds in the fall. I love this picture.
We're identifying the large one in the back, aren't we, Greg?
Yeah, that's the one we're going for. The others,
Great.
what other ones? I don't see anything else here. But this is a neat picture. So we'll just get the big guy in the back out of the way. That's a killdeer, and that's a pretty obvious killdeer. No real question or discussion about that.
Screaming sentinel of the mudflats.
Yes. But those three other birds, those are interesting. And so the first thing to note is that this is in Colorado again. So it's western birds. The thing that we see here, so we have two birds on the right that look to be about the same size. We have a bird on the left that kind of appears to be a little bit bigger, but look at the difference in bill shape and bill size.
Yeah, so the two birds on the left, I'm looking at a pretty significantly decurved bill, but perhaps most notably one that is pretty slim at the base even, and kind of slopes to a point, whereas the one on the bird on the, I'm sorry, did I say on the left? I meant on the right. The two birds on the right, it's a pretty narrow bill all through, whereas the one on the left, that is a very, very thick bill at the base, and it's very long. I mean, the shape is similar. I mean, the shape of the bill, but like where the bill starts is different. The birds on the right, with the bird on the left, the other bird has its bill in the mud. You can't really see that very well.
Right.
But I mean, it looks like a slider bill just all told, whereas the one on the left is like just really hefty and heavy and substantial.
So the two birds on the right are the same species, and they're giving us a good look at both the front and the top of the bird. And the bird on the left is nicely posed so that we can see the front and the back and the bill and everything. And so we notice that the difference in overall plumage. And when you take a moment, at first it's like, oh my God, these birds are so similar, I can't tell them apart. But actually, you take just a few moments to look at them, you can. And as we were just discussing, the bill size and shape is the most obvious thing.
Gives them different profiles. I'm also noticing the color on the back, especially the bird on the far right, altogether far more rusty than the sort of grayish brown bird on the left. And look at the leg color too. Leg color.
Exactly. We've got yellow legs on the bird on the right, and we've got black legs on the bird on the left. And because of that killdeer, we know approximately how big these birds are, because we know a killdeer is about the size of a robin on stilts. Um, so on the right here, we have least sandpipers
Yep.
with that very distinctive least sandpiper, finely pointed bill. Looks like it's very finely sculpted. And on the left, we have a western sandpiper. And the thing that I like about western sandpipers, even when compared to semi-palmated, which is the one they're most confused with, is the bill just looks like it's kind of like this putty bill that was stuck on there and it hasn't quite been shaped right yet. It just looks like a little too big and dorky.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like this photo because I mean I can just imagine these birds like moving on the mud flat and kind of doing the things that I always associate with these two species, namely, especially the far bird on the right. Least sandpiper, they crouch. They just crouch really tightly, very close to the mud. Very bent legs. They sometimes, if you're really far away and you haven't gotten close enough to get a look at them, they look like little mice kind of scurrying around on the mud flat. You don't really see much else in them. Whereas the western sandpiper and semi-palmated sandpiper, and like all the larger calidris, the larger peeps, they stand much straighter. They stand much taller. They don't crouch as much. They'll go out into a little bit of the deeper water. And that's the sort of thing that you do see when you're observing these birds in life that really does make a lot of difference and can at least lead you down the right path to getting those identifications correct.
Absolutely. And least sandpiper tends to, while it's crouching, it tends to pick at things, whereas the western and some of the others mentioned they probe. They'll be in the water and they will probe up and down, kind of like a slow sewing machine, or much more like that than least sandpiper will.
Yep. So we nailed the killdeer on this one. Nice job.
We did. Nailed the killdeer.
Got the killdeer. There's actually a western sandpiper. I need that bird for my county. And there's been one hanging out at a mud flat that's about like literally not more than 5 minutes away. And I haven't been able to get out to go get it.
Well, when we're done here, time for a lunch break.
Maybe I will. Yeah.
So we're going to stay with the theme. And this is another picture that I really, really like. And this one is from Curtis, Ohio. And so we've got three sort of gray, kind of big and rather big compared to the ones we just saw, kind of bigger bodied.
Is definitely bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with sort of the proportion of the body to the head. If you look at those little peeps, the body looks small and the head looks very large. And so when I think especially with shorebirds, when we talk about size, how big they are, what we're really talking about is proportion, because we really can't make a ton of judgment on the size of these birds based on what we're looking at on these birds, like in this photo. But the proportion, the head to the body, gives me the impression that these are larger bodied birds. And that's correct. That's a correct impression to have.
So now all three of these birds have yellow legs, and all three of them have gray backs. But they have different bills. Now the bird on the left has a very short, kind of chunky bill, whereas the bird on the far right has kind of a straight, heavy needle shape. It's kind of a straight, caricature,
equally thick all the way to the end.
Caricature of a sandpiper bill, just that straight bill. Now look at the bird in the middle, and that bird's got a little bit of a droop to the bill. The bill is definitely thicker at the base, with a narrower tip, and it's just got a little droop to the tip of the bill. And so what we're looking at on the far right is one of the most common shorebirds this time of year, and that is the lesser yellowlegs. And it's got that relatively short for a yellowlegs straight bill. If this were a greater yellowlegs, the bill would be longer, have a slight upturn to it. And also I think in this pose the neck would look longer. It would just look a little bit lankier and
I think that's true.
And bigger.
Yeah, I'll be honest. My first impression of that bird was a greater, because I could not really get a sense of its actual size compared to those birds in front, because it does look to be behind them. So it's kind of hard for me to figure out exactly how big it is. But you have convinced me. I think that was just based on my first impression. And no, you're absolutely right. That bill is straight and needly like a lesser, and yeah, the greater yellowleg's neck would be longer. They're almost like a miniature egret,
Yep.
the way they move around and the way they're shaped.
So now the bird below the yellow legs, again, gray mottled back, but the back pattern is different.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice the tertials, which are the feathers above the wingtips, on the yellow legs are spotted, and on the bird in the center they are not. They're plain gray. The bird has kind of a different scaly back, but it's also got that nice supercilium, that white line over the eye, and
Yeah, a little bit
all
of a
that put to
dark cheek
huh?
too. A little bit of a darker
Yep,
cheek
little bit
too.
of a dark cheek, and kind of a straightish bill with a droop, not a
Mm-hmm.
curved bill, but just kind of a droop at the end with the yellow legs. All of those put together are a stilt sandpiper.
Definitely.
And
Yeah, it's
I
interesting that you
this
note the tertials, and I'm only just saying that because that always feels like sort of a really jargony term for me. But what we talk about when we say wings, a lot of times those are the tertials.
yeah,
Those are the feathers that are like when the bird's wing is folded. Those are the feathers that kind of cover those wings. I don't know. Those sort of protect the primary flight feathers, the secondary flight feathers. I don't
well, they
know,
certainly
but
they lay on top.
yeah, yeah. I don't know, but yeah. Sometimes we think of those as like the flight feathers, but they're actually kind of the well. I mean, if you're looking,
Well, they are flight
aren't
feathers, but
yeah, they're like on the upper arm, right? So like the
no, they're
humerus,
close. They're
coming up.
close down at the. They're like all the way in the back at the
Oh,
bottom.
okay. Oh, right
Yeah,
on. Okay.
the closest to the body.
Yeah.
Um, so now look at this bird on the left. It's really a pretty bird. That really kind of, I don't know, how would you describe that gray? It's kind of a
It's like an
almost
ashy
a
gray.
ashy
Yeah.
aluminum.
Yeah.
Like
It's a neat color.
it's a different color, and when you see this bird, you'll notice that color. It's different from most of the other shorebirds that you're going to see, and also look at that bill. The bill is just a kind of a
It's
heavy,
thick. Yeah.
thick. Um, uh, it's not necessarily a probing bill. This bird lives on when it's migrating, lives on sandy beaches, picking things off the beach. Oftentimes, I would imagine little crabs and things that need a little more crunching, so the bill is a little heavier. But that color, and Mia says silvery gray, and yes, silvery gray is a
Right.
good way to describe that. With a little bit of scalloping on the back, this is a red knot,
Yeah.
which is a good bird for Ohio.
I was gonna say when I first saw
Ohio.
this photo that you put up, I had to kind of take a second look at like Ohio. What's that? What's a red knot doing in Ohio? But there's one of those birds that I think migrates over land more than we give it credit for, but frequently does not touch down. Like they'll do that long jump from the eastern seaboard where they famously feed on all the horseshoe crab eggs. Well, I don't know that they do that in the fall, but they're leaving their Arctic breeding grounds and they're flying over the continent and usually not stopping until they get to the coast. And so they when they get knocked down by storms, like potentially Hurricane Ida, I think we saw a lot as Hurricane Ida was sort of making its way from the Gulf Coast up across the eastern part of the continent. I think that storm knocked down a lot of those transcontinental vagrants or migrants rather that we don't usually see because they migrate like straight over a lot of the Midwest, things like long-tailed Jaegers and
Yep.
Savin's gulls and red knot. So yeah, this has been a good year for those kind of birds to kind of put down by the storms, and you see them in places you don't necessarily see them that often.
Yep. I mean, there's in the Great Lakes, there's always a few, but
Yeah.
as you say, there's many more that go over without stopping. And
Yeah, Hudsonian Godwit is another one.
yeah,
I remember.
now
I remember a storm that made a landfall in North Carolina a few years ago, and it knocked down a bunch of Hudsonian Godwits on inland lakes. And so there were like, usually it's a bird that if you do see it, it's like a one off or maybe two, but there were like a flock of like 15 at a mud flat in the storm. And as soon as the storm was past, they were gone.
Yeah, and like red knots, Hudsonian Godwits are one of those birds that tend to be fairly site specific. During migration, there's they have staging points, and there's a couple places in Kansas, for instance, where they stage in large numbers before heading south, where they winter in Chile and Argentina.
They go all the way down.
It's a very long distance migrant, but there are some places, in Illinois, for instance. We have a couple of wildlife refuges that have made a point of having good shorebird habitat. They manage the water levels, and we have had them. They're annual, not very many, but you'll get 3 or 4. But it's the same. They if you maintain the habitat and it's always there, they'll stop for a little while.
Yeah, that's always a big thing. Trying to convince Fish and Wildlife or whoever or state wildlife agencies to maintain habitat for shorebirds in the fall. That's always kind of all I know is what it's like in the Southeast. And if you try and encourage them to do so, they'll say, "Oh, we don't want the water to get too low because then it will grow up too much, and then it'll be bad for the ducks in the winter because they want the duck hunters to come out in the winter." Exactly. But that's not necessarily the case. That a lot of times if they manage for shorebirds in the fall or rails or other sort of migratory birds like that, and then, after those birds are gone, then they ramp up the water levels so they can attract ducks. I mean, it's not like an either or. Like you can have both. It's just a matter of convincing the right people to do that.
And there's a bit of there is a bit of lethargy there, where it's like, well, this is the way we've always done it for ducks.
Exactly.
We're not gonna
we're not gonna
change the way we do it for shorebirds. But they should.
They should absolutely.
So. That is it for our birds, and we are ticking up on the hour.
If anyone has any questions or comments or questions about birds and bird ID, we haven't really done a ton of that this time, but there haven't been a ton of questions in the comments. Please let us know. We've got a little bit of extra time. Otherwise, we're going to vamp by talking about the ABA. If you enjoy these sorts of free resources and appreciate the things that we can do, I mean, we're going to try and bring this What's This Bird Live thing back every other week now into the fall. So look for us again in a couple weeks at this time. Check out aba.org. It's the other way. aba.org. I always get it wrong. aba.org. It's off my left shoulder. aba.org/join and join the ABA. We certainly appreciate it. Join the club. You get access to our great publications. You get discounts to some of our partners like Video Books, and you can travel with us now that we are slowly easing our way back into that world, into a post-pandemic world. I don't want to jinx it. We're getting there. We're still dealing with it. We'll get there. We'll get there, folks.
But we have a wonderful new hire running our travel program, and from what I've seen in the beginning here, it looks like it's going to be really robust and some really neat new things that
I am excited
I think you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, I am excited.
A different approach than we've had.
Yeah, a lot of times when people we say travel, people think of things like those big international birding tours to Africa or South America or whatever, and we'll continue to do those. But I think what Katinka has in mind, Katinka Doman, who's our new travel and events coordinator, what she has in mind are a lot of sort of more localized events, going to where birders are, and doing smaller events, small weekends, ABA weekends with staff and friends and local birders, and hopefully getting us out to where you are, wherever you are in the ABA area in the future, in the next couple of years as we ramp that up. So that's really exciting. Bianve asks, where can I get information about upcoming events? aba.org/ what is it? Travel? aba.org/
or just right on our homepage.
It's right there at the front,
right in the middle. But
we got a lot of cool stuff. Check it out.
When you think about travel, when you think about that kind of travel, what you were mentioning, it's like people who haven't traveled around the United States and Canada looking for birds outside of their home territory.
Mm-hmm.
They know there's great places to go, like South Texas and Southeast Arizona and South Florida, and other places.
North, there's good stuff in the north too.
Northern Minnesota, the Seattle area. So what do you do when you get there? And so we're putting together trips for people who are like, yeah, I want to go birding there, but I don't really know how or what to do it and how to get around. And we're gonna have you covered.
Yep, I think that's the plan going forward. We also are revamping our Young Birders program. I should also mention that Laura Gerard is taking over that. She's another new hire here at the ABA that we're very excited for. You may know her from her work at Black Swamp Bird Observatory, but she is going to be running the ABA Young Birder programs. That is our camps. Those are our Young Birder of the Year mentoring program. And some other stuff as well, but those are the two main tent poles of that, and we're very excited about all this. The ABA is growing thanks to you who are members and those of you who support us, and we've got some exciting things planned.
$2.50 a month, a cup of coffee a month.
Not even.
You can join and be a full member of the ABA for $30, $2.50 a month to help us do all the stuff we do. And like Nate said, gain access to our magazines and other member content like Listing Central, which we will be bringing up here in one of the future shows and show you all about that neat way where ABA members can keep and maintain their life lists.
Yep. We got big plans for this What's This Bird Live thing. We're going to expand it. That's part of the reason why we took the summer off. And but we'll be back. We'll be back in a couple weeks.
One last thing. Speaking of events, is that if you are headed out to them, ABA will be at the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival in November, and we will also be at the Space Coast Birding Festival in January, which is in East Florida, Merritt Island.
Exciting stuff. We've got our Bird of the Year coming up as well.
You can hang out with us.
We're going to have some good stuff. Please help keep supporting. Smash that subscribe button. That's what the kids say, right? That's what the kids who are on the YouTube
if you're on the YouTube, hit
that subscribe button and follow us. Make sure you don't miss any of these What's This Bird Live programs.
And I think with that, Nate, I think we're probably going to have to cut it off right now.
Yeah, that's right. See you guys. We'll catch you in a couple weeks. Keep an eye out on the ABA What's This Bird page and also on the ABA's flight calls. We'll make sure to mention it in there as well. If you have any questions, you can find us all on social media and on Twitter. Otherwise, we're going to say goodbye, and we will catch you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.